Next on Max TV, we take a look at Klitschko Arreola. We go through Mayweather Marquez pay-per-view numbers, and we have news and notes. Coming up on the next round. And welcome to the next round, brought to you by Everlast once again. Gabriel Montoya, Steve Kim, talking boxing. And today, a special edition from the auxiliary press box. But Saturday night, we're at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. Another promotion brought to you by K2, and your heavyweight title was on the line, the WBC belt. Vitaly Klitschko, the TKO in 10 over the game. Chris Arreola, your scores, 99-91 twice and 100-89. Gabe, I think this fight, for the most part, went pretty much as expected from the pundits. You had one guy that was hard charging, but a guy that was simply inexperienced and perhaps not in the physical condition he really needed to be in. And I think Vitaly Klitschko, like a Floyd Mayweather, they may not be exciting, they may not be entertaining, but they are completely effective. He basically shut down Chris Arreola.
Yeah, for everything that Chris did, Vitaly had an answer to it. I thought the first 2-3 rounds, it kind of showed what Chris would be like if he was in really good shape. He was kind of slipping, moving, a little bit elusive with his upper body. But then as he tired, he became more stationary, kind of more upright, and he just got really picked apart by Klitschko.
Yeah, I think it was a systematic dismantling, if not aesthetically pleasing. I think in the beginning that Vitaly Klitschko kind of lined him up, had to scurry away at times using his distance. But then more and more as the rounds went on, 8, 9, and 10, he started to really put him in the crosshairs with that right hand. He set him up with the body shots early on. And I think, again, physical conditioning, you can say what you want about the Klitschkos. In the past, I've called Vitaly brittly with those injury problems. But since coming back, I don't think he's really lost a clear round against Samuel Peter, Juan Carlos Gomez, and now Chris Arreola. Now, I think it's clear once again, there are two class of heavyweights, and I said this in my Monday article. There's the Klitschkos, and there really is everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, they're just a cut above, man. I mean, they're a foot taller and is miles ahead of everybody in terms of conditioning and in terms of technique, experience. Just the things he's able to do in the ring. I mean, you can see him just kind of unveiling different tools. Arreola kept kind of slipping and moving past the jab, and so he kind of added a little hook as Chris would dip to his left. So that kind of changed that plan. And then as Chris's guard got higher to try to block the jab rather than slip it, he started adding in a right to the body, which lowered his hands and opened him up for the right over the top. It was just classic boxing.
Yeah, and Vitaly Klitschko, I think, is one of the very few fighters that can get away with the cardinal sin of pulling his head back. Because the geometry of the fight, Chris Arreola, I thought, was in a couple of things that were really, really troublesome. Number one, he didn't move his feet quick enough, and when he did close the gap, he was basically neutralized on the inside. One thing about Klitschko, they're very, very strong physically. Yeah. And once he got on the inside, he got neutralized. And then you had a referee that was not allowing Chris Arreola to work on the inside. I thought he was breaking them up awfully quickly, and that's exactly where Arreola needed to be. And I think, again, the one thing about the Klitschkos, and I give them credit for it, they don't care what me, you, or the fans think. They are there to win a fight. And right now, I think their aggregate record is like 91-5 with 80-some-odd knockouts. So you could say what you want about them not being the most exciting, but on paper, this is one of the greatest duos in the history of boxing when it comes to brothers.
Yeah, they're ridiculous. I mean, people will always bring up, boxing fans are very, very fickle. They'll always bring up, Vladimir getting knocked out or Vitaly quitting. But, this is 2009, and these guys are as dominant as we get. They're not Mike Tyson. They're not the most exciting fighters in the world, but they're incredibly efficient. They're very good at what they do. They totally understand who they are as fighters and what their strengths and weaknesses are, and they fight accordingly. I mean, it is kind of beautiful to watch.
If you appreciate that style of boxing, and I mentioned this in my Monday article, that I think there is a difference between the European sports fan and the American sports fan. We out here are bloodthirsty savages. We like the violence, we like the blood and guts, we like American football. While Europe, they love the beauty of a 0-0 soccer game. We in this country cannot stand soccer, which is one of the great things about living in America from my standpoint. But if you look at a European boxing crowd, even at great fights, they're very, very subdued. Yeah. There's not a lot of catcalls, there's not a lot of booing, there's not a lot of hissing, and they clap politely like they're at Wimbledon in between every single round because they appreciate the art of self-defense. And I think that's the difference. And even as the dominant as Vitaly Klitschko was on Saturday, you were there with me on press row. The crowd got awfully restless going into the second half of the fight because for them, they simply did not see enough action.
No, even Arreola was upset. He wanted him to stand and fight with him. But, Vitaly understood that was his only chance. I mean, I think we do have to give some credit to Arreola. A lot of people, on press row, a lot of the fans I interact with, they all gave him very little chance. They thought he was going to get blown out in 6 rounds, that he didn't belong in the ring with Vitaly Klitschko. And the flaws we did point out with Arreola, for all of them, I think he would have given any other heavyweight a lot of trouble that night.
No, I think Chris Arreola, the problem he had was way back in camp. We're talking about June, July, and August when he came into camp at 294. He needed to be at about 240. He was at 250, which is the best they were going to do at that point. Yeah. But I think they need to be honest with Chris Arreola. The one thing Chris Arreola did fairly well, at least in the first half of the fight, was close the gap. Simply could not pull the trigger then once he got into that area that he needed to be at. Also, I think he needed to have better stamina, but that goes back to physical conditioning. Now, I felt bad for Chris Arreola. We know him very well. I'm very good friends with Henry Ramirez, but our job is to tell the truth here. It is great that this thing affects him the way it does, that he doesn't just care that he got $1 million. I really like the fact that he cares about it. He has a certain amount of emotion. But to back up that emotion, it's not going to mean anything if in 2 weeks he goes back to his past behavior that brought him back to 294. Bottom line is, Gabe, everybody wants to win once they're in that arena.
Yeah.
Vince Lombardi once said that the will to win is the most overrated thing in sports. He says the will to prepare to win is what's really important. And quite frankly, Chris Arreola has one, but not the other.
Yeah, one emailer sent me in something that said, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And in a sense, that's what Arreola did. I mean, by coming in at 294 or 300 pounds, he added a whole other fight to this fight. He had to fight against his weight, and then he had a fight at the end of it with Vitaly. And then rather than improving on your game because you're in shape and you're able to kind of use the gym as your lab, instead it was a fat farm, and he was trying to just drop a bunch of weight. And you saw in the second half of the fight, he began to tire. Even Vitaly said he could feel his power diminishing, and that's all it is the prep that leads up to the fight. And I didn't have a problem with him crying or being all emotional. I'm glad that he cares, but I want him to care 3 months before the fight. I want him to care 365 days a year so he can reach his full potential.
Right. Being a professional prize fighter at that level, when you earn that much money and you get these type of opportunities, it should not be treated as a part-time gig. Another thing I brought up to Dan Goosen at the post-fight press conference, 2 things. I thought really that Chris Arreola, from a prize fighting standpoint, I thought this fight was about 2 to 3 fights too early. And another factor is that when you become a quote-unquote HBO fighter, like a lot of Al Heyman guys are early on in their careers, the days of you fighting 5-6 times a year and constantly getting out there, honing your skills, and for Chris Arreola, staying in the gym and training are over. And if you look at what's happened since he's become a quote-unquote HBO fighter, he doesn't fight all that often. So it's almost like the Riddick Bowe syndrome to a certain degree. While you might work hard in between fights when you're in the gym for a fight, problem is it doesn't happen that often. I think there has to be a concerted effort to make sure that Chris Arreola, next year and beyond, fights at least 3 to 4 times a year.
Even if a couple of them are off TV, just keep busy bouts. I think with him, he's the kind of guy that you can't give him a lot of time to idle. He'll blow up. He'll get distracted. You got to keep him, always with a carrot in front of him. You're going to fight this fight, in a few months, and then you're going to fight this tune-up fight, and then you got a big fight. And just keep him motivated. And I think, behind the scenes, it seems like Henry Ramirez and Dan Goosen, they understand that he needs to stay in good shape, but I don't think they do him any favors when they sit in a press conference and when we ask about the weight as our job as writers, and they kind of deflect it and say, we just want the best Chris Arreola. It doesn't matter what weight he comes in.
They're enabling.
Yeah, they're totally enabling him, and they're just, encouraging bad behavior. And, it does matter what weight he comes in.
Yeah, absolutely it does. And I think, again, this is all about professionalism. And say what you want about the Klitschkos. You may not like their style, but they are incredibly diligent in their work. Going back to Vitaly, I guess now in December he's going to fight Kevin Johnson, the Kingpin. I want to say right now that's a difficult fight from a style standpoint.
Yeah.
One thing Kevin Johnson can do that Chris Arreola could not, that is move lightly and quickly on his feet. He's a very educated left hand, one of the very best jabs in boxing. It's like a piston pumping. I don't know if he's Larry Holmes or Larry Donald, but I do know this about Kevin Johnson. Incredible confidence.
Yeah.
Physically, he's got good size, and he's an athlete, and he can move and change directions. Vitaly's going to have to find him a little bit. Vitaly came and had a target that methodically was going to move at the same direction all night long against him.
Yeah.
Kevin Johnson's going to move and step off and make Vitaly work to find him. I think Kevin Johnson does provide a pretty good test for Vitaly.
I think so. You mentioned the referee, John Shirley. I think that's a big part of it is who's reffing the fight because, they came to clinch and every ref is kind of different. They all have their different things that they like or dislike. But Shirley kept breaking them immediately, and Arreola was actually working. Klitschko would just kind of clinch on, and then the Shirley would come in like 2 or 3 seconds and just break them automatically. I kind of disagree with it. I think the Kevin Johnson fight, he's not the biggest infighter in the world, but I think that's going to be a big factor, is who's refereeing the fight. How they allow the opponent to fight. It's going to be I think a hell of a challenge, though. That stick he's going to be able to jab with Klitschko, which not many people can do.
Yeah.
Double jab, change it up, change speeds, because all Arreola did was start kind of fast and just get slower. And I don't think Kevin Johnson's going to do that.
The biggest question I have about Kevin Johnson, and I know Kevin very well, very bright guy, great personality, and I met him in Memphis last year for one of the Arreola fights, I believe against Chaz Witherspoon. He happened to be out there, and he shook my hand, and I said, Kevin, that's the first time I've ever seen you use the right. That's the key to this fight. We know he's going to jab. Will he do enough offensively with the second hand to win this fight? That's the big question that I have.
You look at Arreola, and the one big factor, we talk about the weight or maybe his style, this and that, but his will to keep coming forward, take punishment, and not take no for an answer. A lot of the Klitschko opponents do what Teddy Atlas says.
Van Peter did it.
Yeah, I won't try to knock you out, and you don't try to knock me out, and you can win. It's okay. And Arreola refused to do that, no matter how badly he was losing. And I wonder with Kevin Johnson if he's a silent contract kind of guy. He may start to jab, and the right hand goes away. He becomes very passive offensively in there. I think that's going to be a huge factor.
Yeah, so there you have it. Vitaly Klitschko wins once again. We come back with round number 2 of the next round, brought to you by Everlast. And we are back on the next round, brought to you by Everlast. Big news for Floyd Money Mayweather. His pay-per-view against Juan Manuel Marquez, believe it or not, Gabe, reportedly does 1 million pay-per-view buys, according to HBO pay-per-view, generating over $50 million of income. And I got to say this about Floyd Mayweather. Hate him, love him, loathe him, can't stand him. He's a draw. The bottom line is this. He has crossed over. He's been on 3 24/7s. The only 24/7s that have any interest at all, from a personality standpoint, involve the Mayweather family. He's been in some big high-profile fights with Ricky Hatton and Oscar De La Hoya. He's made at least 10 to 15 HBO appearances. He has his own commercial with the AT&T. You got to say this. You may not like his style, but he is certainly one of the 4 or 5 biggest pay-per-view attractions in the game of boxing.
Yeah, after the Oscar and Hatton fights, I guess it can't be denied. Yeah, they've created a star. At the gate, I don't know how well they did. They did a lot of papering for the fight. And I think that does speak to how exciting fans think he is or isn't. But everybody stayed home and said, "Fine, we'll pay the $50," and you can't really criticize him anymore. But now the onus is on him. He is what he says he is. He's the face of boxing, or he's the biggest draw in the sport. And he's got to act accordingly. He's got to start taking on the tough fights. Before the show, we were discussing what are the big fights left in boxing. You got Mayweather versus Pacquiao, maybe Mayweather versus Mosley, maybe Mayweather versus Cotto. The problem is we're only probably going to get one of those fights if Floyd stays with his current mentality. The onus is on him to drive the sport and to be the flagship for the sport. I question whether or not he'll do it.
Well, we'll see if the Pacquiao fight or Cotto fight can be made, because there's also a line of thinking that because this fight did so well and Mayweather believes that he has all the leverage, you're dealing now with Mayweather / Al Heyman vis-a-vis Bob Arum. And those personalities do not get along, and I think that they're both going to be insistent. Our side deserves 60-40, and they may not budge. So that is a 40-point swing in either direction to make that fight a reality. Couple of general thoughts. I think, number one, Golden Boy did a brilliant job of marketing and promoting this fight like it was 2009, using digital platforms. Number two, getting it out there to the youth of America. I think for too long, boxing had been promoted or commercialized in a way that was like 1979, and all just doing the same TV and newspaper ads without using the other technologies. And number three, I actually think this bodes well for boxing in the sense that it's not a Mexican guy, and it's just not Oscar De La Hoya doing the big numbers or a Mike Tyson. And number four, I think to me that the lesson learned here in terms of pay-per-view, we've had 2 shows this year, and they've both done very big numbers. Hatton, Pacquiao, and now this one. Less is more. Because a couple of years ago, let's say 2006, 7, and even 8, when you had fights like Zab Judah and Shane Mosley or Ricardo Mayorga, Shane Mosley that were scheduled to be pay-per-view, you saw what happened, the dilution of the numbers and the decline of the numbers while UFC made this big run. I think the lesson is, again, less is more when it comes to pay-per-view.
I totally agree. It seemed like they had a bunch of pay-per-view slots and they had to fill them no matter what they were filling them with. And now we're getting back to the notion of what pay-per-view originally was. That the biggest fight possible, okay, we're going to charge money for you to see it on TV, but it was worth it, and they did their best putting together a good undercard. I mean, the whole product was very solid. The Chris John Rocky Juarez fight ended up being kind of a bummer, but, they tried, and they put solid fights and title fights on there, which is the way they used to do it. I think this does bode well for the future.
And I think a lot of little things. You take a look at the in-house production of the previous show that was brought to you by Golden Boy Promotions. They didn't just stick it on HBO. They actually put it on Fox Sports Net. That's 90 million homes that potentially aired that thing. I think little things like that make a difference. They did a lot of work the week of the fight. Open workouts, the press conferences, making everything open to the public, corporate tie-ins, activations, rebates. I give Golden Boy a lot of credit. In the past, I've accused them of Walmarting this business and really using a cookie-cutter formula to kind of not only hurt the business, but not necessarily helping it along. I think they have found a template that, number one, we need to find a younger audience, but number two, be selective in the fights that you choose. As for Floyd Mayweather, I think he's going to do something very simple. He's going to wait till November 14th, and if he can't make a deal with them, well, I think that Shane Mosley, I hate to say it, I think Shane Mosley becomes a pawn. That if Pacquiao wins and Mayweather's already got that fight, I think to me they're going to say one thing. If you don't want to fight us, we might get Shane Mosley. And guess what? Shane Mosley might once again be a yo-yo.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to fight Mosley until after Mosley's done with Berto. You get him one more war, which I think that fight's going to be very tough for both Berto and Mosley. And he's going to wait. The big question will be in terms of leverage is going to be how the Pacquiao-Cotto fight does. If that can get 1 million buys, which it very well could. They both have really solid fan bases. Then it's going to come down to both guys agreeing to 50-50.
I think there's pressure on Bob now. Like the ball's in your court, and you've already stuck out Yuri Foreman. But I think Bob understands that. I got to pull out all the stops because if this guy did 1 million, I need to do 1.3 just to make sure that I could tell everybody Pacquiao deserves more. And I think to me, one of the more interesting aspects of this whole thing is that we didn't even bring this up. UFC 103 was basically on the same day. Dana White went on a smear campaign against boxing and Mayweather, and he got his comeuppance because from what I understand, they really did not do that well. They may have done half the numbers of numero uno, and to see Dana White so humbled, that is something I thought I would never hear.
Yeah, it'll probably last about 5 minutes, and then he'll put on his other UFC, 103 or 105 or whatever he's got going. But it was a nice sign for boxing because, more often than not, when people find out I'm a boxing writer, the first question is, oh, do you cover the UFC too? So, no, I told you I'm a boxing writer. But they always ask, is UFC killing boxing? And in a sense, for years, boxing had actually been killing boxing. UFC is it's apples and oranges. But, we've been hitting the fans with more and more pay-per-views, and they were becoming less and less high quality. And I think right now, this is what the competition is all about. That Bob's got to step up his game. Then Golden Boy's got to step up theirs. This can only be good for boxing as opposed to putting pay-per-views on the same night or fights on the same night with the competing promoters. That's the bad type of competition. But this can only be good.
Yeah, so there it is, round number 2 of the next round. We come back. We wrap it up with news and notes. And we're back on the next round, brought to you by Everlast, Steve, Kim, Gabriel Montoya. We go to news and notes. We go to the fight review in Chicago. It was a good fight from what we're told. David Diaz, majority decision in 10 over Jesus Chavez. Then Saturday in Ireland for the WBA junior featherweight title, Punsawat Kratingdang Jim, the TKO in 3 over Bernard Dunn. He is your new world champion. And I didn't see the fight. I know you're very impressed with my pronunciation of the Thai name.
But I'm 3 times.
I am not surprised, though. Bernard Dunn is a tough, hard-nosed kid, but he's also a guy that was very lucky to beat Cordova for the title about 7-8 months ago. And he's a guy that's a back-and-forth fighter. He's blood and guts. Also very, very vulnerable.
Yeah. I was impressed to find out a KO in 3. I mean, I had picked him by decision. He's kind of a grinded-out guy. I was really surprised when he beat Cordova, and then for him to come out and just kind of make a statement. Maybe it is true that you get the title and you become just a little bit better.
Yeah, and David Diaz against Jesus Chavez, and we have not seen this yet for full disclosure, but from what I understand from people out there in Chicago, it was every bit the bloodbath that we expect. A lot of back-and-forthing, a lot of leather being thrown by both guys.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where both guys go. I mean, Jesus Chavez, I think is coming to the end of it, at this point.
I think Chavez is done. I think Diaz gets one more payday on HBO.
Yeah, he'll be fed to some lightweight somewhere. You know, I mean, the lightweight division is full of tons of guys. You know, I wouldn't mind seeing him, and maybe this is too huge of a step up. You know, they're talking with John Molina Jr. fought on the undercard of the Staples.
Interesting fight.
I think that's a hell of a fight for him. He's moved to lightweight now. He looks very strong at the weight. You know, he blew out Efren Hinojosa in 38 seconds of the first round. Just, you know, digging to his body. He landed this beautiful body shot and came back with a left hook. You know, and just finished it. That might be a good step-up fight.
The one thing Molina has not faced yet that David Diaz will bring, pressure.
Yeah.
He's going to grind on him. He may be getting beaten. You saw this against, who was that lightweight? Armando Santa Cruz.
Oh, yeah.
You could beat him for 9.5 rounds, yet he will still come and he'll always be a little bit dangerous. You know, he'll be tough. One thing David Diaz can do is absolutely grind. One fighter we didn't mention, the Fight Night Club at the Club Nokia a couple of days ago on Thursday, Louis Ramos, Charles Huerta win. Now, this is the last scheduled of the first 4 that Golden Boy put together. I hope this series continues with or without versus. This has been a very good series locally. It's a good time at the fights, and it's a great venue for young fans to get to know the boxers and for young fighters to ply their trade. I really enjoy this series.
I really do, too. I mean, I went to the premiere of it, and then I skipped the middle one, and I came back, and it was nice to see it had really kind of taken on a whole new life. The first show felt very papered. You know, people weren't sure what to expect. When the fights finished, it felt like a high school dance with people on either side not knowing, you know, if they should dance. Is this a club? But, you know, this time the vibe was great, man. The music was bumping, and people were excited.
No one was dressed alike, so it was not the Sadie Hawkins dance, and no one had the tux on, so it certainly was not the prom or the winter formal. But the thing that was heartening to me was, as LA's finest gets to work here, good luck, guys, is that
they'll never find me up here.
At the beginning of the night when the doors opened, there was nobody there. And I was like, oh, my God, has this thing lost steam? By the end of the night, a very sizable crowd had come in through the doors at the Club Nokia. And I got to give Golden Boy credit. Again, I think they've had a resurgent year this year. They're doing things. And I got to thank AEG and Golden Boy, because without them, for the most part, we have a lot of club shows in LA and Southern California, but there would really be no world-class professional boxing without AEG, Golden Boy, and some of the local promoters. So I got to give my tip of the cap to them, because quite frankly, I'm a boxing writer. I just don't want to cover club shows all the time, Gabe.
Yeah, no, not at all. But, you know, it's nice to see these guys, you know, bringing kind of an upscale venue, you know, to downtown. I mean, it's cool to go see the fights on a Thursday. You know, it was interesting getting into the fights themselves. You know, seeing Huerta, who had been knocked out by Derek Wilson in the first round, looks a little tentative.
Oh, he looked gun-shy, didn't he?
Yeah, he looked
like
gun-shy.
a kid that almost drowned, and next time he goes into the pool, he's only putting that big toe in there, and he's only staying in that shallow section. But again, it's early in the process. Going on to the fight preview, Alan Green takes on now Tarvis Sims, that is the TBA. Henry Crawford takes on Antoine Smith to open things up. Then Saturday in Australia, David Tua. Yes, David Tua takes on Shane Cameron. Alan Green, I guess, is the Mariano Rivera of the Super Six. In other words, he's warming up in the bullpen here.
Yeah, that's basically what they're just keeping his edge, you know, keeping him fighting. He's to me, he's the most exciting guy that isn't in the tournament. I really wish that he had gotten in. I mean, granted, you know, Jermaine Taylor is a big name, but he'd just been knocked out. And I would have liked to have seen Alan Green in the show, but I have a funny feeling. I'm going to make a prediction, just jumping to the Super 6 really quick. Arthur Abraham knocks out Taylor brutally, knocks him out of the tournament, and they bring in Alan Green.
Wow, that is a bold prediction. Henry Crawford, Antoine Smith. Antoine Smith is a guy that if you've seen him on ESPN 2 or 3 times in a row, he's come in as kind of this late, unknown guy that's supposed to be the opponent that upsets the apple cart. All of a sudden, he got the attention of a lot of promoters, and Lou DiBella was the guy that kind of won him. There was a little bit of a bidding war for him. I like Antoine Smith to beat Henry Crawford, who I believe has a built-up record out of Jersey. I've been told the winner of this fight may be getting Mike Jones next year, and I love that fight. The winner of this fight against Mike Jones of Philadelphia.
It would be nice to finally see Mike Jones get some run, you know, get him on some TV and get him some fans, because he's the most exciting guy people aren't talking about. I can't wait for it.
Yeah, and David Tua, Shane Cameron. Does anyone care about David Tua anymore?
No.
Okay, then moving on. We go on to tidbits. A couple of things here. December 12th, this is being talked about. The rematch between Juan Diaz and Paulie Malignaggi. We might have a deal, and it may be on the East Coast, and it may be a co-promotion with DiBella Entertainment and Golden Boy. This would be the main event on a Boxing After Dark broadcast. January 30th, I've been told this is a done deal for the most part. Mandalay Bay, Las Vegas. Shane Mosley, yes, he is still fighting. He'll take on Andre Berto on HBO. And this is a fight that looks like it will happen. I reported this in my live daily blog last week. Bernard Hopkins takes on Roy Jones in 2000. 10. All right, going back up top, Juan Diaz, Paulie Malignaggi. I have a feeling Gail Van Hoyt will not be flown into the East Coast to judge this fight.
I do have a feeling, yeah. I have a feeling it's not going to be that exciting yet
Here's
again.
my point. Do we really need to see this rematch?
No, we don't. Can we talk about David Tua versus Cameron?
No,
Yeah,
it's too late for that. Juan Diaz, Paulie Malignaggi, just because it's controversial does not make it must-see TV.
No,
and I think Paulie Malignaggi should actually thank Gail Van Hoyt. Because of this, he earned another payday, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he was sitting there talking about how boxing has screwed him and HBO is screwing him and everybody's screwing him.
Not screwing him here.
Yeah, you got a second payday. You made a good effort, and this time step it up just a little bit more. Maybe turn over your punches once in a while.
Shane Mosley, Andre Berto. My question is this. Shane Mosley seems to be thinking about everybody and anybody except his next guy.
Yeah,
a little bit worried about that psychological standpoint, looking ahead?
I think that's really, you never want to look ahead. No one wants to ever look ahead. That's how you get knocked out, There's a million classic examples of it. I worry about Shane. I think this is a really tough fight. It's going to put some miles on him. And I just kind of wonder what the plan is.
Gabe, did you think that when he dismantled and destroyed and annihilated Antonio Margarito about 4 blocks from here on, I believe, January 24th of this year, you would not see him for another 53 weeks?
That just makes no sense to me whatsoever. I mean, he just totally squandered all that momentum. It was the reemergence of Shane Mosley, of a great fighter. You're like, wow, that's why we all liked him in the first place, And then he didn't fight at all this year. Now he's getting fed to Andre Berto in a sense. I think he beats Berto, but I think he's going to have to go through a little bit of hell to get it done. And at 38, you really shouldn't be doing that.
I was just worried we might see Antonio Margarito return to the ring before Shane Mosley. And Gabe, I woke up this morning, I looked at my Peanuts calendar. Right now it has Linus and Snoopy right there. Huh. And it's interesting to me that the calendar says 2010. It doesn't say 2002, right?
Yeah.
Because my question is, why the hell are Hopkins and Jones fighting now? And why are certain writers treating this like it's a big deal?
Can we talk about Tua versus Cameron? It's 7 years too late. I mean, they should have done it when they had the 60-40 I'll kick your ass argument. It was still a relevant fight then. But now it's going to be on pay-per-view. Fans, just show them what you actually think about this fight, and just don't buy it.
From what I understand, the rematch between Michael Spinks and Dwight Muhammad Qawi will be on the undercard, and then I also have been told that Bob Foster will be taking on Dick Tiger. Wow. Golden Boy again putting on some great undercards, right?
Oh yeah, just amazing, just classic, all-time great stuff.
But there's no interest to you whatsoever, no intrigue at all.
There's some. I think what this fight's going to show is how well skills age versus athleticism. The first fight, I think that was the big difference, was that Jones kind of knew who he was. He was this physical phenom. And Hopkins was just kind of a green fighter. He was coming up. He still hadn't quite become Bernard Hopkins. I think the tables have really turned. I think Jones has declined just enough that Hopkins' skill, his whole brain trust of Nazim Richardson and everyone around them are going to put together the right game plan. I think he's going to beat Jones down.
How much credit does he get for that, then? Because my question is, RJ now is not in capital letters.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, what does it really prove if you even up the score here?
He aged better?
You may be right about that, but we're going to see what type of undercard they put on. But Jones-Hopkins, it's actually amazing that certain writers are saying this is great. I'm telling you, why is it great, though? Yeah. I'd rather have this slot for young fighters, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's the one thing it does take away is a TV date for some young and up-and-coming guys or some better super fights that we could put together. But in terms of divisions and everything, it doesn't hold anything up. It doesn't take anything away from that. But yeah, this is kind of one for them, I guess.
Okay, well, there you have it for this week's edition of TNR, brought to you by Everlast on behalf of Gabriel Montoya and the rest of Max Boxing. Till the next round, goodbye, everybody.